Imagine your body's own construction crew. You know, the one that builds and repairs your skeleton. What if it suddenly went rogue? Instead of just fixing bone, it starts building it everywhere. In your muscles, your tendons, turning flexible tissue into solid bone. Now, this isn't science fiction. It's a real condition called heterotopic ossification, and its story is, well, a centuries-old medical mystery.
So, picture this. It's the 17th century, you're in Paris, and a report from a physician named Guy Patton comes across your desk. He describes a patient who, and I quote, became hard as wood. It's just this bizarre, almost unbelievable account, and it's one of the very first documented cases of this phenomenon. It was a puzzle that would stump the medical world for hundreds of years.
So let's start right there with the so-called woman of wood and trace the really fascinating history of how we've come to understand this condition.
You see, for centuries, we kept seeing the same process, but we kept giving it different names depending on where we saw it. In the 1930s, you had shoemaker femur from the repetitive trauma of hammering leather. During World War I, it was called paraosteoarthropathy in soldiers with terrible blast injuries. We know now these weren't different diseases at all, but just different phases of the same exact condition, heterotopic ossification.
So that brings us to the core question. What exactly is this rogue bone-building process? Let's get a clear definition.
And we're not just talking about some minor calcification here. This is the formation of real, mature bone. The same stuff that's in your skeleton, but it's happening completely outside of it. This rogue bone can literally lock up joints, cause incredible pain, and basically build an internal cage inside the body's soft tissues.
It turns out there isn't just one cause for this. HOG generally follows two very, very different paths. One is written directly into your DNA, and the other gets triggered by injury.
So here you can really see the two faces of this disease. On one side, you've got the genetic form, famously known as Stoneman syndrome. It's caused by a single faulty gene, and the slightest bump can trigger this runaway bone growth. But on the other side, you have the traumatic form, which shows up as this devastating complication after severe injuries, anything from major surgery to combat wounds.
And just to get a sense of how incredibly rare that genetic form is, look at this number. Fibrodysplasia ossificans progressive, or FOP, affects roughly 1 in 2 million people. It's one of the rarest diseases known to medicine. But then, look at this. The traumatic form can be shockingly common. After certain severe fractures or major hip surgeries, the chance of developing some degree of HO can be as high as 90%. That is just a staggering contrast, and it shows you why this is such a huge clinical concern. So how can one condition be so incredibly rare and yet so common at the same time? Well, the answer is in the biology. It's in a cellular signal that's gone completely haywire.
Okay, so in a healthy body, building bone is a super tightly controlled process. Think of it like a four-step command. A signal molecule, a BMP, arrives at a cell. It plugs into a receptor called ACVR1. That receptor then sends a message down the line to the cell's command center, and the cell gets its orders. Build bone. Simple, effective, and it only happens when it's supposed to.
But in the genetic form, FOP, a single tiny typo in the gene for that ACVR1 receptor changes absolutely everything. It's like a perfectly good faucet that suddenly develops a crack. The receptor becomes hypersensitive and leaky, constantly dripping out that build bone signal, even when it should be tightly shut off. Really, the best way to think about it is this. That mutation essentially jams the master switch for making bone into the on position. The cell just can't turn it off, and that leads to this relentless, progressive formation of unwanted bone.
So the obvious question is, right? If there's bone where it shouldn't be, why not just go in there and surgically remove it? Well, it's not nearly that simple. This is where the cruel irony of heterotopic ossification really hits you. The very act of cutting out the unwanted bone is itself a major trauma to the tissue. And what's the primary trigger for the traumatic form of HO? Trauma. So surgery can kickstart an even more aggressive cycle of bone growth. For patients with FOP, it's almost a guarantee that the bone will come back. For decades, this has just been an incredibly frustrating problem for doctors and patients. But now, because we understand the fundamental biology, researchers are finally finding new ways to step in. The entire strategy for treatment is shifting. So instead of just trying to manage the symptoms with anti-inflammatories, which is like constantly mopping up a flooded floor, The new approach is to target the root cause, that overactive signal. It's about actually fixing the leaky faucet.
And this isn't just theory. This is happening right now. These are real drugs in late-stage trials that are designed to attack the problem in different ways. Saracatinib, for instance, acts like a key jammer, plugging up that faulty receptor so the signal can't get through. Garetosmab works more like a bodyguard, intercepting the signal molecules before they can even get to the receptor. And palovarotene, which has already shown some amazing results, works to stop the bone-forming process further down the line. This is real, tangible, life-changing progress.
And that brings us to one last really fascinating thought. All this research is about stopping bone from growing where we don't want it. But what if, by mastering the off switch, we also learn a whole lot more about the on switch? Could the secrets to preventing heterotopic ossification one day unlock brand new ways to speed up bone healing where we desperately need it, like in fractures that just won't heal? It's a powerful idea, turning a rogue process into a blueprint for repair.